So Vladimir Kara-Murza is the second most important political prisoner in Russia after Alexei Navalny. Vladimir is a dual Russian-British national. He's worked with me over more than a decade to get the Magnitsky Act passed and to get the Russians' assets frozen around the world who have been committing human rights abuses. And the Russians tried to kill him with poison in 2015 and 2017. He went back to Russia in 2022 to protest the war. And he went on CNN, called Putin a war criminal, and 12 hours later he was arrested and sentenced to 25 years in prison, where he sits today. He is suffering from the after effects of poison. He will die in prison, like Alexei Navalny died in prison, if we don't get him out. And he's a British citizen. And so it's a matter of huge urgency and high priority for me to get out my friend, my colleague, and my ally, Vladimir Kara-Murza. And so I went to the Munich Security Conference, and I signed up for meetings, and I had meetings one-on-ones with a dozen foreign ministers from the EU and other places. And my proposal was very straightforward, which is that this is now the most important political prisoner because Alexei Navalny is dead. He's British. We need to get him out, and he's the guy who could potentially lead Russia if Putin regime falls. And what we need to do is we need to organize one of these, what I call bridge of spy swaps, like in that movie where we identify some Russian spies that are held in prison in the West, and we swap them for Vladimir and a few other Russian political prisoners in Russia. And I proposed this idea to foreign ministers from a number of different countries. And one by one, everyone said, I think that's a good idea. We support you. I didn't get anybody who said there was no support for that. The only country that doesn't support it is the United Kingdom, is Britain. And Britain has been very, very stubborn on this issue, saying we don't negotiate on hostages. And which is not true because, of course, it required Richard Ratcliffe, Nazanin's husband, to do a hunger strike for a month in front of the Foreign Office before the British negotiated to free Nazanin. But here this is something that's not even a British situation. It's an international situation. In Britain, so here I am basically having to go around and freelance this whole thing with a bunch of other countries who will help. And Britain is going to sit this one out. And I find that just completely unacceptable.
Because these are countries where he is not a citizen.
He's not a citizen of Lithuania.
So then all going further than his
right, and he is a citizen here.
Yes.
But these guys are going to sit it out. And you know what? If you've got a British passport and you get into trouble in a foreign country, good luck to you because this government's going to do nothing for you.
And this isn't a consequence of treaties or Brexit or other dilutions of that passport's power in the world. This is a direct consequence of political decisions taken by the current government.
This is a policy decision where these guys are absolutely afraid to step out of the policy. And Vladimir Kara-Murza, a British citizen, is going to die if they don't. And I find it shameful and unacceptable that the British government doesn't not just take. Right now, they're taking a backseat. They should be the leader on this thing. They should be outspoken. Yes. They should be organizing the other countries. We should be finding the prisoners in other countries, and we should be organizing the swap. And our foreign secretary should be standing on the edge of that bridge when Vladimir Kara-Murza comes across that bridge when we get him out.
The other foreign leaders, particularly European ones, have also been fairly forthright in calling for sanctions on the Russian regime, on cronies or allies of Vladimir Putin. Alexei Navalny's death focuses the mind, as you have attested already, on the $300 billion worth of Russian central bank reserves that are currently frozen. What's the legal situation on that? I mean, what would be the legal response? Or would Western governments be entirely within their rights to confiscate that?
Absolutely. So Russia has created $1 trillion of damage to Ukraine. We currently hold $300 billion of Russian central bank reserves. Putin broke it. He should fix it. There's a thing called the law on countermeasures, which justifies the confiscation of that money. It just requires some political will. And here I think the government is actually a bit better than they are on the Kara-Murza situation. They're going to. Cameron has been pushing for this. The United States is pushing for this. The bottleneck is the EU. I think that now with the Navalny murder, everybody should pass whatever accompanying legislation there is to clarify any outstanding legal issues. Each one of those pieces of legislation should be called the Navalny Act. And this does two things. It helps Ukraine in a moment of desperate need for ammunition and funding. And it also is two fingers in the eye for Putin. And this is really important. And if we call it the Navalny Act, then we have a great...
That hurts him doubly, doesn't it? Rhetorically and financially.
Exactly.
It's been 2 years almost at the end of this week since that full invasion was begun by Putin. I mean, this could have happened at any point in the last 2 years. Where do you derive your hope that it might happen in the next one?
Because the Navalny murder really is beyond the pale. Everybody is scrambling to try to figure out an appropriate response. And it can't be just like sanctioning 20 people. Of course, we can sanction 20 people, but that if we do that, that would be such an inappropriate response. And Putin will be laughing and saying, okay, who's next? Who should I kill next? Maybe it might be me next. Putin needs to see that like really bad stuff happens if you kill the most important political prisoner in Russia.
So they're two separate proposals, really, aren't they, which could both carry the name of Alexei Navalny. I know that Joseph Borrell, the EU's chief diplomat, has suggested that the whole regime of sanctions could be called the Navalny regime, but this you're specifically addressing the $300 billion worth of central bank reserves, which could...
Well, and let me say something about that Borrell thing. That's the Magnitsky Act. He doesn't need to change the name of the Magnitsky Act. That would be completely inappropriate. What, we're going to just like forget about Sergei Magnitsky? No. Yes. We confiscate the money. We call that the Navalny Act for Borrell, who, by the way, when he was being introduced as foreign policy chief, he had never even heard of the Magnitsky case. This guy shouldn't be like eliminating Sergei Magnitsky's memory from their human rights Magnitsky Act.
No, you're absolutely right. It's an entirely unnecessary intervention, and yet we welcome the EU's moves to impose a new batch of sanctions. Hungary's opposition has been removed, I think, so they press forward with that.
Well, let's see. Yes. Hungary may not want to rear their head in this particular moment.
How big an issue is the proximity of the current iteration of the Conservative Party to Russian plutocrats in London for your cause or for the bigger picture in general?
I think that everybody who is connected to the Russians has run for the hills and pretending they never had met a Russian in their entire life. It's not popular here in the UK right now to have had any connection to the Russians. Of course, we know that there were many people who did. There are members of the House of Lords who, one in particular, who was out lobbying for Oleg Deripaska to get him taken off the sanctions list. And this particular member of the House of Lords got a $5 million bonus when he got his companies off the sanctions list. But right now, everybody is kind of laying low.
They're in abeyance at the moment,
yeah.
So it isn't an issue. You don't think that the hand of the British government is anyway stayed by the sources of some of the donations they've received over the last 10 years? Or?
No. I mean, they're being very disloyal donees.
Yes, I suppose there comes a point where the quid pro quo, the quo disappears, however much quid there may be, I suppose. Bill, good luck. It's always interesting to talk to you. I won't say a pleasure, because I wish that your mission was over and the call for these things. There must be a little bit of you that feels, I mean, you keep warning about what is likely to happen next, and then it happens. There must be a little bit of you that is downcast by days like
last.
Of course,
I'm totally demoralized by the murder of Alexei Navalny. It's just the most horrible thing. He was a friend, he was a colleague, he was an ally, and he was somebody that I really liked and respected and admired. And for him to be no longer with us, I'm still having a hard time processing the fact that he's killed.
And finally, just one little thing I don't fully understand. How can people like Vladimir Kara-Murza be subject to British government policy on hostage negotiations? He's not unlike Jimmy Lai, on whose behalf you also campaigned, and whose son Sebastian has been in that chair many times. If you're being held prisoner by a foreign regime, how can that have the same sort of status in the eyes of the Foreign Office as being held hostage by a terrorist group or a rogue regime?
The Foreign Office doesn't want to help the people held hostage by terrorists or by governments. Right. They just don't want to get involved. And so if you get unjustly detained as a British citizen, you're really out of luck. If you had a French passport or an American passport, your government would come and protect you. But if you're British, forget about it. And that policy should change. And I think that I'm going to push on both the Conservative and the Labour government to change that policy.
Bill Browder, a tireless campaigner. It's almost an understatement, but responsible for the Magnitsky Act now being introduced in many, many territories. And it's fair to say the scourge of the Kremlin. I'm sorry for your loss, Bill, as well. Thank you. It's 4 minutes after 12. I've been riding roughshod, even by my standards, over the junctions and the times today. I promise I shall do better in the final hour of the programme.